And thank you everyone for joining today's briefing session for the Early Psychosis Youth Service. I'll just start by asking all of the panelists to introduce themselves. So I'll go first. My name is Steph Lenton. I am the Mental Health and Suicide Prevention Program Manager here at Capital Health Network. My role in this project, so I am the project manager for the Early Psychosis Youth Service, which we are also referring to as Headspace Early Psychosis, and I will be chairing today's briefing session. I'll just pass on to Emma.
Thanks very much, Steph. My name is Emma Hall. I am the Mental Health Project Officer at Capital Health Network, and I'll be assisting throughout this whole process. I will pass across to Anais.
Thanks, Emma. Hi, everyone. My name's Anais. I'm the General Manager of Health System Improvement here at Capital Health Network. I'm going to pass over to Mamta.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mamta. So I'm the Senior Manager with the Health System Improvement team. And I will pass over to Mandy.
Sorry, I'm not sure Mandy's able to introduce herself at the moment. I'll just get Greg, if you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, Greg Young. Welcome everybody from Headspace National, representing Headspace. So thank you.
Christiane.
Hi everyone, Christiane Cuniel, Headspace Early Psychosis Implementation Lead with Origin. So happy to be here with everyone. And I'll hand it over maybe to Courtney.
Hi all, I'm Courtney Wood from the Department of Health and Aged Care. I'll pass over to Jodie, my colleague. Thanks.
Thanks, Courtney. Hi everyone, I'm Jodie Obst. I'm the Director of Youth Mental Health at Department of Health and Aged Care, and Courtney is in my team.
Thank you, everyone. So I'll just start by sharing my screen and we will go through with the presentation for this briefing session. Okay, so before we begin, I would just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we attend this briefing session from today. For us in Canberra, that is the Ngunnawal people, and we would like to pay our respects to their continuing culture and the contribution that they make to the life of this city and region, and pay our respects to their elders past and present. Sovereignty has never been ceded, and this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. We would like to extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples present today, as well as to the traditional custodians of other lands that you might be attending this briefing session from. And we would also like to acknowledge the individual and collective experience of those with lived or living experience of mental ill health and recovery, and the experience of their carers, families and supporters. We value and respect the vital contributions of those who share their unique perspectives for the purpose of learning and growing together to achieve better outcomes for all. So I'll just provide a brief overview of how today's briefing session will go. So first and foremost, this session will be recorded to ensure that the questions and answers can be captured accurately. This recording will not be shared outside of CHN, but we will be using it to inform a Q&A document, which will go up on the CHN website after this session. So any of the questions that you do say that do end up on the recording will go into that document. So throughout this session, we will begin by introducing Capital Health Network and providing an overview of the Early Psychosis Youth Services Program and the associated model. And we will run through the request for proposal and the assessment criteria. We will then discuss the unique requirements of this tender, including the collaboration with Canberra Health Services and the documents that are required to support your application. We will then provide an overview of the procurement and establishment timeline, including the process for successful and unsuccessful tenderers and the opportunities to receive feedback from CHN. And then we will take questions. So please note that we will likely not be able to answer all questions today. We might have to take some questions on notice and answer them in that Q&A document. And that should be published on the CHN website on that tender page that you would have seen the initial RFP go up. And that should happen probably next week. All questions during the session should be added to the Q&A box on Zoom. And you may ask you may ask questions throughout the presentation, but we will not answer them until after we have finished the presentation. Okay, so I'll begin by just providing a little bit of an introduction to Capital Health Network and our role within the ACT for those who are not familiar with us. And then I'll pass over to my colleague Emma, who will give us more of an overview about the Early Psychosis Youth Services Program and the RFP process as well. So for those of you who are not familiar with CHN, we are the primary health network for the ACT. Primary health networks have been established by the Australian government with the key objectives of increasing the efficiency and effectiveness of health services for patients and improving coordination of care to ensure that patients receive the right care in the right place at the right time. So on the right of this slide there, you can see the 9 priority areas of Capital Health Network. We are the only PHN in the ACT, and so we do work quite closely with the local health system, including and not limited to ACT Health Directorate and Canberra Health Services. So I'll pass over to Emma now, and she will provide an overview about the Early Psychosis Youth Services Program.
Thank you very much, Steph. So for those of you who may not be familiar with this program, the Early Psychosis Youth Services Program, which you'll hear us affectionately call EPYS, aims to reduce the incidence and severity of psychosis within the community through prevention, early detection, and coordinated care delivery. EPYS sites provide support to young people aged 12 to 25, based off a model developed by Origin Youth Health called the Early Psychosis Prevention and Intervention Centre, or EPPIC Model. This early intervention in psychosis is aimed at 2 groups. One, those experiencing a first episode of psychosis, or FEP, and those at ultra high risk of developing psychosis, or UHR, which is a specific set of criteria developed by Origin that perhaps indicates a higher risk of moving into that first episode of psychosis category in the future. As you can see here, this is a graphic just designed to sort of break down the different layers of the EPPIC model and the principles, aims, and functions behind it. We start at the principles at this very high level, moving into the sort of aims of what this particular service model aims to achieve. We've then got the core functions, which are focused around that early detection, acute care, and recovery-focused interventions. And then the model is built around 16 core delivery components, which sort of define how the service is functionally delivered, and the key aims and sort of objectives that a team is going to participate in. So as I said, the Early Psychosis Prevention and Intervention Centre, or EPPIC model, was developed by Origin and provides a blueprint for specialist early intervention in psychosis care. This is a nationally and internationally recognised model of high skill, effective care for psychosis, particularly in young people. It operates around a number of guiding principles, particularly that expert care is easily accessible. There is a holistic biopsychosocial approach to clinical interventions. The service approach is comprehensive and integrated. The clinical practice is guided by an evidence base. That a youth-friendly culture reflected in attitudes, behaviours, decor, context, and youth engagement is evident through all parts of the service. A spirit of hope and optimism is pervasive throughout the service, that all aspects of the service are family-friendly. The service has the mindset and skills to deliver culturally sensitive care to all patients and families, and that there's a high level of partnerships with local service providers. So these will be some key things to remember if you're looking to apply for the RFP. Now, the EPYS program operates within the Headspace network as Headspace Early Psychosis, occasionally HEP. The ACT program is planned to integrate with Headspace Canberra, which is the current site located in the city. As far as the naming convention goes, you may hear us use both of them. EPYS, when we're referring to that, perhaps refers to that national model that's based more just on the guiding principles. HEP is what it is in a practical sense, how it's going to be public facing, and what that service will actually look like to consumers, to carers, to the public. So a key distinction there that's important to know. Headspace National is closely involved in the establishment of EPYS sites, including supporting alignment with the Headspace Model Integrity Framework and the trademark license deed. Also supporting is Origin, who assist in implementation of these sites through a number of activities, including providing professional development and training to staff in psychosis and youth mental health, and supporting assessments of fidelity to the EPPIC model so that we can be sure that sites are delivering that model correctly. All right, moving on to actually detailing the RFP PAC 096A. So this request for proposal is being delivered by Capital Health Network, and we seek to procure a lead agency to deliver the EPYS program in the ACT as Headspace Early Psychosis. This service, as I mentioned earlier, will be integrated with Headspace Canberra, which is planned to be relocating to accommodate this expanded team. We are in the process of commissioning a site consultant, a local property expert, to assist with this process in finding a large and appropriate site to host these services. And that is something that is detailed in a little bit more specificity within the RFP and will be sort of discussed further as this process continues. The successful lead agency will be aiming to commence services delivery by the 1st of April 2024, and funding for this program is provided via Capital Health Network by the Department of Health and Aged Care, and is available until the end of the financial year 2025, aka the 30th of June 2025. This is a breakdown of the services required by the lead agency. I will note that these are not expansive. These are not fully expansive. There may be others that will be required within this process, but these are the broad expectations of the successful lead agency. We've broken them down into 3 broad categories, moving from developing the program, establishing the program, and then providing the service. Developing the program will involve activities such as consulting with stakeholders to localize the EPYS model, planning for the integration of services with Headspace Canberra, collaborating with stakeholders to ensure that this service is integrated well within existing health and mental health systems across the territory, identifying physical site needs and contributing to this site procurement process that we detailed earlier, as well as working alongside Capital Health Services and the Specialist Youth Mental Health Outreach Team, or SIMO, to plan to reduce duplication, align communication, and foster collaboration, which we'll go into a little bit broader detail later on in this presentation. Next, establishing the program, we do expect establishment of the service by the 1st of April 2024. There'll be significant interface with Headspace National and Headspace Canberra in developing and establishing this new operational site. Again, continued interface with CHS to explore and support co-location of the SIMO team, which is something we are exploring with them. We'll be recruiting a multidisciplinary workforce that needs to meet all operational requirements, the development of effective operational and clinical governance, and engaging in community consultation as an adjunct support across all activities. And finally, in terms of the ongoing provision of the service, this is a very broad category that's hard to capture in just a few dot points, but it will be a continued commitment to delivering all ongoing core components of the Headspace Early Psychosis service, complying with the Headspace trademark license deed, and maintaining service fidelity to the EPPIC model, which I'm sure Headspace and Origin may be able to provide more detail on, identifying opportunities to foster community awareness and education around psychosis and its risks and treatment and management, operating from an optimistic, person-centered, recovery-focused and trauma-informed perspective in all operations, and participating in the development of an integrated service model with Capital Health Services, Canberra Health Services, and the SIMO team. So these are the main service agreements and deliverable or reporting requirements that will be required from the successful lead agency. Initially is the project plan. This will need to address the expected scale up of services. Service does not need to be fully established by the 1st of April 2024, but does need to be at a base level of operation and continue broadening from there. This will also need to include a stakeholder engagement plan, as this program does involve significant engagement with community stakeholders. There will be service model documents along with associated operational guidelines, a marketing and communications plan, and recruitment strategy. There are further details within the RFP, but these are expected within the first 2 months of the contract execution date. There'll be ongoing performance and financial reporting, which under CHN's operations are 6 monthly. Ongoing status meetings and reporting, which will be fortnightly until the service delivery implementation, and bi-monthly for the first 6 months, then quarterly thereafter, with room for negotiation or adaptation to relevant needs as they come up. And then finally, of course, the commencement of service delivery by the 1st of April 2024. Now, these are the outcomes that we are expecting from the service. These are open to negotiation with the successful lead agency or the preferred lead agency during that contract negotiation stage. And they may be expanded upon, modified, swapped out. That is a possibility. These are accompanied by some KPIs in the contract. Again, these are available for negotiation. The first of these outcomes is that the HEP service is easy for young people, their supports and referrers to access, and is able to respond rapidly to these potential new clients. Young people experiencing first episode psychosis or at ultra high risk are effectively identified, treated appropriately, and supported with best clinical practice. The third of these outcomes is ongoing care provided to young people by the Headspace Early Psychosis team is clinically effective, addresses situational needs and complexities, and follows these person-centered, trauma-informed principles. Fourth is that young people accessing the service have a positive experience within Headspace Early Psychosis. Fifth, the families, carers, and other supports for young people within the Headspace Early Psychosis service are recognised and offered dedicated assistance. Sixth, community awareness and knowledge of psychosis, including key risk factors associated with the development of psychosis, is increased. And seven, and final, young people not eligible for admission to the Headspace Early Psychosis service are supported to access other relevant and appropriate forms of care, which will be a major feature of the service, is providing those warm referrals and ensuring that these young people continue to be supported, even if they're not necessarily appropriate under Headspace Early Psychosis. That's my coverage mostly done, so I will pass back to Steph to detail the remainder of the process for the RFP.
Thanks, Emma. I'm just providing now a little bit of an overview of the anticipated budget for the service. So some of you may already be aware that there were some internal delays on the establishment and reaching this point of the service. So the funding that was initially provided to Capital Health Network for establishment in 2022 to 2023 financial year will be rolled over into the 2023 to 2024 financial year in this RFP. So that brings the total amount of funding for both establishment and service delivery in the 2023 to 2024 to just over 7 million. And then in 2024 to 2025 for service delivery is 5.6 million. This brings the total amount of funding available for Headspace Early Psychosis through this tender at 12.7 million. We do anticipate some underspends, of course, for this service, and we have reflected this in the RFP given the timelines that are available and the anticipated establishment date of the 1st of April 2024. And these underspends will be explored and discussed with the successful lead agency following this tender process. So this is just an overview of the assessment criteria. You will have seen the RFP and the response form, which will ask you to respond to these assessment criteria. So initially, we request that you provide us a vision, a local vision for the role of Headspace Early Psychosis in the ACT. We've allowed a word count of no more than 750 words for this section, and it will be weighted at 15% of your application. We request an overview of your experience in providing mental health support services, which will also have a maximum word count of 750 words and a weighting of 15%. We request an overview of key governance structures and systems for headspace early psychosis and how you would propose that those would operate. This is weighted 35% and has a maximum word count of 1,500 words. We then request a high-level projected staffing profile and a proposed recruitment strategy for the service. This will be weighted 20% and has a maximum word count of 750 words and the option of providing us a one-page staffing profile as well. We understand this would be a projected staffing profile and this would be something that would be negotiated further with the successful lead agency. And finally, we request a response to budget and value for money, which would include an itemised budget and an explanation of how this proposal will deliver value for money. This is weighted 15% and has a maximum of 500 words plus a one-page projected budget, which again will be negotiated with the successful lead agency following this tender process. There are some additional requirements which I won't go into too much detail at the moment, and you will see those in the request for proposal form as well, and we're very happy to answer any questions about those. But this will include evidence of communication with Canberra Health Services in relation to the Headspace Early Psychosis service, an overview of your current organisational structure, and any existing organisation level clinical and corporate governance frameworks. As Emma had alluded to earlier, Capital Health Network acknowledges that there is an existing specialist youth mental health outreach team in the ACT, which we refer to as CYMO, and this is operated through CAMS by Canberra Health Services and provides early psychosis care to a similar cohort. Capital Health Network and Canberra Health Services have been working very closely together in the sort of development and establishment of this service so far. And we have established mutual intent to explore integration of these two services. So the successful lead agency will be required to participate in this integration process, and we will aim for a development of a formal integrated services agreement between Headspace Early Psychosis and CYMO by early 2025. So there is a table on this slide that outlines some of the activities that we propose we would like to progress for that integration, which includes developing ways to reduce duplication and improve access to care, aligning communication strategies, supporting possible co-location of the CYMO service with the new Headspace Early Psychosis service, and fostering inter-service teamwork and communication. Longer term, we would also be aiming to progress ongoing monitoring and adaptation to minimise duplication, to identify and address emergent challenges, and to collaborate to develop an integrated services model that improves upon both services and delivers the best possible form of early psychosis care for young people in the ACT. This slide provides an overview of some existing documents that we very strongly recommend that you review before providing us with your application, as these will provide a lot of background information about the early psychosis service. So this includes the EPPIC model and the service implementation guide, the EPPIC model briefing pack, the Australian clinical guidelines for early psychosis, the revised EPPIC model integrity tool, and the roles and responsibilities in the commissioning of the Headspace Early Psychosis program. All of these documents are available online via the CHN website tenders page. Here we have provided a high-level procurement and establishment timeline. So the RFP is open at the moment and will be closing by the 14th of August 2023. We aim to be identifying the preferred lead agency by the 15th of September 2023 and progressing contract negotiation in that period, with a contract finalised by the 29th of September 2023. Establishment for the service will then operate between CHN and the preferred lead agency between October 2023 and March 2024, with the services due to commence by the 1st of April 2024. So that concludes our overview of this tender process and the early psychosis program. We're very happy to take some questions now. I can see that we have a couple of questions in the chat already. We might just take a couple of minutes to prepare for those questions, and then we will start answering some questions live. Thank you. I can see that there are some questions in the webinar chat as well. I would request if everyone can please put their questions in the Q&A section of this Zoom rather than the chat, as it will help us to make sure that we're monitoring and we're answering every questions. And if you have any questions that you're not able to ask today, we're very happy to accept questions out of session as well. And if you could please contact our tenders email by close of business on the Friday, 14th of August, we will continually update that Q&A document as we get more questions between now and that time. And the email for that tenders inbox is in the chat. So we have one question in the chat that is reflecting about a hub and spoke model in which Headspace would be considered the hub and the second site the spoke. I will clarify that this is actually a hub outreach model, not a hub and spoke model. The reason for this decision has been based on the cost effectiveness and the size of the ACT, and the model that we felt would be the most appropriate way to ensure that services could be provided across the ACT and surrounding regions in the most efficient way for our community. Headspace Canberra will be the hub for Headspace Early Psychosis, and outreach will be provided to Headspace Tuggeranong. There's a question in the chat asking how Canberra Health Services would prefer to be contacted, given there may be a number of providers interested. We will take this question on notice, and we will include Canberra Health Services contact details in that Q&A document. A question asking if the inclusion of any additional attachments that provide further insight into our responses not to extend word count are permitted. I might ask Aeneas if you would be able to answer that question for us.
Yeah, I think we'd be willing to accept that, any attachments. And I've just also noticed that there's a question in there about risk management plan. So we would be willing to accept an attachment to those, yeah.
There is a question asking, with regard to the integration of Headspace Early Psychosis and SIMO, is there more information on the scope and remit of SIMO, including their workforce profile, so we can start to plan accordingly? I'll pass over to my colleague Emma to begin an answer to that, but we will provide more information about that in the Q&A document as well.
Thank you, Steph. So SIMO, the model of service delivery, is also an early psychosis intervention service. They are loosely based on the EPPIC model, but as they are not an EPPIS site, are not required to follow the same fidelity requirements. And they primarily focus on the sort of initial outreach process to young people in distress, as well as providing some ongoing case management. The SIMO currently delivers services primarily to young people in the 14 to 25 age profile. So there is a slight difference in ages there. However, their services provided to young people under that UHR category, the ultra high risk, are within a reduced age profile within that. So it's not that entire 12 to 25 for both age groups. As to the current staffing program profile, that is something we will have to take on notice. As we do have a number, but it is reasonably out of date, so we can check with that and provide that in the Q&A document.
Thanks, Emma, for that response. There's a question asking about the vision for integration with Head to Health, given the average age for first episode of psychosis is 18 to 25 years, and this group are currently often presenting and being managed by Head to Health. This is a great question, I think, about the importance of integrating the early psychosis service with existing services within our region. While this service will be a part of Headspace Canberra, we certainly see that there is definitely scope and room to be integrating it with existing services within the region. Obviously, the main example of this is integrating with the SIMO service, who are providing early psychosis services under the same model, but we do recognise that early psychosis services are being provided as part of the remit of other services in the ACT as well. And we would expect, as part of, I would assume, the local vision section, that we would also expect our applicants to be able to provide us an example of how they see this service as integrating within the ACT broadly. And this would include services such as Head to Health. There's a question asking about the consortium partners for Grand Pacific Health for Headspace in the ACT. I'm not able to answer this question. I wonder, Greg, are you able to answer this question, or is this one that we can take on notice?
I would probably just encourage people to make contact with Grand Pacific Health to discuss those issues, because I think it's a Grand Pacific Health question rather than directly for us to answer. So, yeah, if that's okay.
Thanks, Greg. There's a question asking what the likely timeline for a property being identified. So we are currently in development, or progressing, I guess, an RFP internally for a site consultant for Headspace Early Psychosis, with the view to be moving the existing Headspace Canberra site and finding a site to be able to house both of those services as one Headspace Early Psychosis program. I may pass over to Emma to provide a bit of a scope of the timeline of when we're expecting that process to be completed, as we don't have that RFP out, but we are hoping for that to progress at the same time as our RFP for the lead agency for the service as well.
Thank you, Steph. So yes, as mentioned, we are processing that internally and hoping to perhaps get it live to the public in a couple of weeks. I'm sure you may be able to understand, we do need to balance the procurement timelines for these services. So we are likely to have the site property consultant on board prior to the lead agency for EPYS, and they'll be given sort of the initial task of beginning an early scoping and providing us with a project plan. Then once we have the EPYS lead provider on board, we will be looking to ensure that then there's that consultation with all parties to identify the needs for the physical site for the EPYS and expanded Headspace Canberra services. As far as I can as an extremely rough timeline that is potentially likely to change at this point, we are hoping to have the property consultant on board in September, and then a site be identified by the end of October.
Thanks, Emma. There's a question about whether CHN will provide a budget template. Typically, we don't provide a budget template in our tender processes. We allow any applicants to format the budget in the way that is preferred to them. So yeah, typically that's not our process. And there is a question about whether we can provide details for Grand Pacific Health for any applicants who would like to reach out to them. Yeah, we can certainly do that, and we'll take that on notice and provide that in the Q&A document. We don't have any more open questions at the moment. We might wait another couple of minutes just in case any additional questions come through. Otherwise, if no more come through, we will end the session there. Thank you. So we'll just give it 2 or 3 minutes. So we've received a question similar to the early question regarding multiple tenderers contacting Canberra Health Services. Is it possible to liaise with Grand Pacific Health to determine their preferred contact from tenderers? Yes, certainly. We will provide the contact details for both Canberra Health Services and Grand Pacific Health for anyone who wishes to discuss the proposal with either of those organisations. We'll do that in the Q&A document.
It looks like there's no more questions.
Thanks, Kunal. Yep. Yeah, if there's no more questions coming in today, then we will close the session here. Thank you everyone for joining today's information session. If you do have any further questions that come up after this session, you're very welcome to contact our tenders inbox, which is tenders@chnact.org.au. The email address is in the chat as well. If you can please put those questions in by close of business on Friday, the 4th of August 2023. We will update the Q&A document from this session by next week, but we will continuously be updating that for any further questions that come through in that process. So we would recommend that you keep an eye on that tenders page, as that document will continuously change as more questions come through. Thank you all very much for attending, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Thank you.